Good morning. Our opening words this morning are by Richard Gilbert. Speak, flowers, speak. Why do you say nothing? The flowers have the gift of language. In the meadow, they speak of freedom, creating patterns wild and free as no gardener could match. In the forest, they nestle, snug carpets under the roof of leaf and branch, making a rug of such softness. At the end tip of branches, they cling briefly before bursting into fruit sweet to taste. Flowers, can you not speak joy to our sadness and hope to our fear? Can you not say how it is with you that you color the darkest corner? The flowers have the gift of language. At the occasion of birth, they are buds before bursting. At the ceremony of love, they unite two lovers in beauty. At the occasion of death, they remind us how lovely is life. Oh, would you that had voice, silent messengers of hope. Would that you would tell us how you feel, arrayed in such beauty. Speak, messengers, speak, for we would hear your message. Speak, messenger, speak, for we need to hear what you have to say. For the flowers have a gift of language. They transport the human voice on winds of beauty. They lift the melody of song to our ears. They paint through the eye and the hand of the artist, and their fragrance binds us to the sweet-smelling earth. In June each year, we celebrate Flower Communion. The ritual harkens back to 1923, when Norman Kapak, founder of the Unitarian Church in what was then Czechoslovakia, led that congregation in this ritual one Sunday. And it's pretty straightforward. Flowers are brought by those attending worship, by those gathered. They're shared for all to admire their beauty, and then they're distributed again at the end of worship. It's a simple and a really beautiful ritual, begun with a singular purpose, to remind those worshiping that even in the midst of devastation, that beauty remains. It endures. In this case, it was just after World War I, and the devastation of war was still very much present. This simple exchange of flowers was a physical, tangible reminder of how present beauty is all of the time. And each year when we do this in person, I'm struck by the gentleness, how we recognize the fragility of the flowers. I'm moved sometimes to tears by your generosity of spirit, many of you leaving the best flower for the person who hasn't yet had a chance to select. With these small, fragile, temporary mementos of beauty, we remind ourselves and each other of beauty embodied. And during the ritual of the sharing of flowers, more years than not in my head, I hear faint strains of the hymn, "There's more love somewhere." In this case, it's replaced by the line, "There is more love right here." Your love for each other and the world is so acutely evident in that moment. So it feels hard that we can't be together for flower communion this year, for that physical, tangible reminder of that love, of community, and of interconnectedness. But it's still there, and it's still here. I'll be thrilled, like many of you will be, when it's safe to go back to in-person worship services and much else. I miss the energy exchange, the hugs, the light in the sanctuary, even the din of all the voices at the beginning of worship as we're struggling to quiet as we enter that time together. The beauty of that shared space in the midst of loving community can be breathtaking. But I've seen, too, the beauty of having to shake up the way we've done things. I've learned to love Sunday mornings with the kids and the parents, sharing the little and big moments in our lives. The Monday morning check-in has become this kind of ever-evolving small group of its own. Worship has changed necessarily. Our liturgy is right now shortened, and we're trying some new things. There's been socially distant ice cream drop-offs to some of our housebound elders, drive-by visits to those ill or recovering, and love shared in more ways than I can count. You haven't let a small matter, like a global pandemic, change the way you love each other. And that was exactly Capek's point with flower communion. When things are hard, the beauty is there, either at the surface or just below it, waiting to be noticed, to be found, to be a source of gratitude. And in this doozy of a year, and it's hard for me to believe that we're only halfway through, when so much of the landscape of our world is changing, that's a message we especially need, one worth holding on to. That in the midst of challenge, beauty remains. I'm reminded of a poet, and I believe it's actually in our hymnal, and it's called Jo and Woe. It's called "Joy and Woe Are Woven Fine." And this is how it goes. Joy and woe are woven fine, a clothing for the soul divine. Under every grief and pine runs a joy with silk and twine. It is right it should be so. We were made for joy and woe. And when this we rightly know, through the world we safely go. It's when we know, it's when we accept this complexity, this layeredness of joy and challenge, of beauty and fear, that we become free. And as Unitarian Universalists, as citizens of this country at this historic time, that's necessary to know. Because now, as in 1923, we are somewhere in the midst of a war not only for the future of this country, but for the world. People are scared, tired, and worried, and they're also hopeful, energized, and focused. Joy and woe are woven fine. You know, in the past few years, I've heard a common refrain, I'm sure you have too, and it goes something like this. Did you hear what the president just did? And it's never anything good. The question is always, did you hear of the horror that this president just wrought? And then COVID showed up. And we don't know when it's over. Not yet, regardless of what the politicians say. The health and the economic ramifications, the sheer magnitude of the loss, it isn't yet known, let alone emotionally processed. And COVID reminds us, too, of what we knew but we weren't seeing. It tore away the last vestiges of falsehood. It left us unable to deny the truth of multiple systems that exist to care for the few. Of multiple systems that exist to care for the many. I had it right the first time. It reminds us of multiple systems that exist to care for the few at the expense of many. So when more brutality poured forth from the police, we were primed to rise up and say no more, to find our way into a profound struggle for the future of this country. And yet in the midst of all that, still, joy shows up. Organizers continued their behind-the-scenes work and created the groundwork for the movements we see now. Laws, good laws, sometimes, got passed. Politicians got voted in or out. Babies got born. Young people found their voices, and the rest of us began to learn to let them lead. And that's the thing. That's the reason we celebrate Flower Communion year after year. Joy will arrive. So too will fear and sadness. And we move through it all together. Unitarian Universalism is based in just that, a shared journey. We don't promise ease or an afterlife. But what this faith offers is the promise that we will journey through this together, that you need not be alone during the joys and the sorrows. On this day of Flower Communion, when I can't be with you, know that my heart is with you anyway. Grateful for each and every one of you. Knowing that whatever the world brings, whatever joys and pains, this is the community I've chosen to serve. This is the community you have chosen to commit yourself to. And right now, that's enough to know. Blessed be.
Standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known, the wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sailor, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, are we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens, in a beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the
Our closing words today are from Jennifer Johnson. These are anxious days, hair-pulling, hand-wringing days. We are bombarded from all sides with new and unprecedented developments. Grave threats to our national values and the institutions on one hand, and countless calls to action on the other. And in between the two, the flood of critique and analysis. And yet there are some things we do know for certain. We know that our blue boat home continues to rotate on its axis, continues its familiar sojourn around the sun. The sun sets and rises, and if we remember to pause, we may lose ourselves, but for a moment, in the glorious play of light and color on the horizon. The pulse of life calls us to nourish our bodies with good food and movement, to nourish our spirits with art and song, friendship and tenderness, and quiet. When we heed the pulse of life, we know what to do. To rise in the morning and to rest into darkness. To put our hands, hearts, and minds to work. To meet those in our midst with compassion. To join with the vulnerable and speak truth to power. To play with our youngest and hear the wisdom of our elders. To heal the sick and the wounded. To grieve the dying and remember the dead. To be of use, and sometimes to be still. The pulse of life is beating in each and every one of us. Amidst the clamor of these times, let us heed its sure and steady rhythm. Amen. As you're moved, please join us for our closing song.